I'm Jim Check with Kelowna Now, and with me,
Renee Merrifield.
and we're here with Beyond the Ballot, and obviously the big thing, kind of the big thing, the big thing that
nothing.
turned into that was the Liberal leadership debate last night in French.
I'm sure that you all watched it. It was nothing. It was nothing. I've never seen a debate where they didn't debate. They just had a love-in against Trump.
Yeah, the viewership was quite low, actually.
I can only imagine.
And then there was quite a few stumbles. Mark Carney made some stumbles there. Obviously, the French language, not his first language, so there was a few stumbles there, and CBC was covering for him and saying, that's not what he meant to say. Because there was that Hamas thing where he says, we're with Hamas, and I think there's a couple stumbles there. The one that surprised me was Chrystia Freeland's opening comment, because they all had 90 seconds to open. Mm-hmm. And Chrystia Freeland's open really was, she referenced, and this is the part that I was puzzled with, she referenced that having a conversation with a 4-year-old and how she was going to stop Trump from invading Canada. You know what I mean? I think, there's a lot of people that talk about how the Liberal Party has been about, fear, during COVID, they drove a lot of fear. And this seems to be a step too far, too, in saying that they're actually going to invade us. I know Trump's been trolling us and tormenting Canadians, but I don't know, an actual invasion, I think that's stretching it.
I don't know. And having been a parent of amazing children that are now all grown up, I just wouldn't be talking to a 4-year-old about such things. I'd be trying to keep their world about, climbing on the playground for the most part. But I do want to say, governments have to fuel something to try and get people to vote for them, and the current governments, and I'm going to not just say the current Liberals, but current governments in general were fear mongering around COVID. They're fear mongering around Trump right now, and they're hoping it's a winning strategy. But whether you're the BC NDP with their throne speech, it was all about Trump. It had so much wartime language. I was getting almost aggravated listening to it because it literally was just about Trump and about us being some sort of adversary to this big bad bully. So it's for me the rhetoric has to stop. What are we actually doing? Trump signaled way back, after he was elected, that tariffs are going to come in. What have we done?
Yeah, not a lot of concrete stuff for sure.
Nothing. Governments have just been sitting there and now trying to stoke the fire to try and get people. Yeah, trying to get people really upset about it so that hopefully they'll vote for them.
Yeah. The debate really it wasn't really what you'd see in a debate where people were kind of talking to each, it seemed like they were all supporting each other and even Mark Carney for the most part. And what was missing in the debate was the one person that would have been contentious, and she was basically kicked out on Friday, and then she appealed it, and then she was basically told the appeal because she was hoping to get into the debate, and she was told that no. But the odd thing about Ruby Dalla being removed from the Liberal Party leadership race is that she was actually fired live on TV.
That was so bad. It was so bad. I mean, I don't know if anyone else watched that, but she was basically doing an interview and being told by the reporter that she was being ousted from the leadership. I can't imagine a worse way. I have to commend her on her diplomacy and her decorum in that moment. But that is just ridiculous. To leak it to the media, to leak it to CBC before ever, acknowledging to her is just absolutely uncouth.
I found it really odd, like a public firing. You run a company, to tell everybody else that the person's fired, basically, kicked out of the thing, and to learn it on national TV. And Ian and I were talking about it earlier, was saying she's not getting a lot of airtime with CBC compared to what Carney's getting. And all of a sudden she gets a spot on CBC and she's finally getting her interview, and then she's literally fired on live TV, and which is odd, I think. I find that very odd, and that there should be an investigation into how she didn't know prior to being told live on TV, because that's embarrassing and humiliating.
It's humiliating. That was the exact word that came to my head. And it's almost like if you want to do something but preserve their career, you would do it very quietly. The way that it was done is basically a career ender. It's like we want to make sure that everybody knows that something untoward was done in her campaign. The other question I have, though, is that you don't actually give your campaign donations lists, etc., until well after the campaign is done. That's when Elections Canada would come in and do a full audit of everyone that had given money to your campaign. Like, I'm a little curious as to how this is actually going down anyway. The accusations that are being made, it all seems a little wonky to me, and a little bit suspect.
What adds a little more suspicion to it is that they were basically kicking her out of the French debate anyway, saying that she's not allowed to have a translator, and she seemed to have worked through that. And then all of a sudden they found another way to kick her out. I mean, permanently kicked her out, and then.
I said from the beginning that Mark Carney is the he's going to get his coronation. They're going to try and make it look as real as possible. Last night's debate was basically that. I mean, CBC gave him a pass on his French and on the translation, but the other candidates did it as well. I mean, the other candidates could have jumped all over that, and still they didn't. There was no really, back and forth in terms of the debate. It looked like, basically they were just there as props to prop up the coronation that was about to happen with Carney.
Frank Baylis, one of the least known candidates, had a little bit. And maybe the English debate goes tonight, and maybe
that's going to be more interesting.
The language barrier won't be such a problem for everybody, because I think he had a couple moments there where he actually challenged Mark Carney, and also said that the GST credit was kind of like something that shouldn't have been done.
Well, and I want to say, in any language, right? When you're learning a language, the hardest ones to actually figure out are like jokes, right? Or in debate, those kind of barbs. So they, you might be right in that, maybe it was just about their lack of dominance in the French language. But who's amazing in French? Pierre Poilievre. He actually is astoundingly good in French. In fact, my Quebecois friends will say that he's better than Trudeau in French. That Trudeau has more of a slang to his French, and that they compare it to like a Texan speaking English, is how Trudeau sounds to them, whereas Pierre actually has a striking
he can switch between the
language.
languages quite well. Like, he can actually have a conversation where he's kind of like flowing back and forth.
And he gets the innuendo and the jokes and and he understands how to like kind of make those nuanced conversations in French, whereas the others do not.
We didn't really get to hear a lot about what the Liberals are going to do for Canadians.
What?
What we did hear a lot about is
Trump.
Trump, for sure, the fear, and then also the other big component was the carbon tax, which is kind of just a repackaged carbon tax. Kind of, I think most of them are saying they're getting rid of the carbon tax, but replacing it with a different name, and it's just going to be hidden inside of products.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you're taxing goods that are coming in and trying to equate them to your, to what yours cost to raise everything. That's still going to impact negatively the cost of living for Canadians. It doesn't matter if you just tax industry, because there's a trickle-down effect. Somebody pays for that tax, and it's not industry, I can tell you that much. It's going to be the consumer. So again, it's going to affect the cost of living. There's just no way that you can dance around the carbon tax without getting rid of it altogether, to actually have a positive impact on Canadians. And I mean, I'm listening to what Carney's saying. He comes out with this, we're gonna spend less and invest more. And at first I was like, okay, well that sounds good. It's a good, fiscal, sort of thing. But then you start getting underneath it, and I was like, wait a second, what is he actually saying? He's talking about doing the accounting different, for the country. So then I'm like, okay, is that actually going to balance our budget? Or is that just more smoke and mirrors for him to try and, spend a lot and tax a lot and not make life better for Canadians.
Pipelines is a big thing, but we can't seem to get a straight answer
No.
from the Liberals on whether the pipelines would happen, the east-west one. Because if we look at, I did a really good post on LinkedIn too, and it showed, it was actually a map that Francois Philippe Champagne, an Liberal MP, posted and showed the contribution of GDP across Canada. And Alberta clearly, that one sector is the leading sector in Canada. It's Alberta's energy. And then Ontario obviously has more in a total aggregate, but the energy sector of Alberta is the leading GDP contributor in Canada. And then just think if we had the Northern Gateway Pipeline, the East-West Pipeline, and the Keystone Pipeline.
Absolutely. And that was it was a big push from Harper the last time that he was in. He wanted all of these different pipelines. He had said we're going to have a national energy plan where we actually all come together and do this well. And that was thrown out with Trudeau. They voted against every single pipeline all the way through, save only the Trans Mountain, which went through first under private and then now public. Thank goodness it did. Mm-hmm. Thank goodness it did. That contributes more to the Canadian GDP than all of British Columbia does. Mm-hmm. That is, it's astounding how well that has performed ever since they turned that tap on. So thank goodness we have that one pipeline. But think if we had all of the pipelines that previous governments were trying to do.
And the Teck Resources project, the Frontier Oil project.
Absolutely.
That was a huge project that Teck walked away from. Teck, a great Canadian company, that walked away from after spending $1.5 billion and blamed the Liberal government for that.
100%. So we need to look at, what is the plan moving forward? And last night, there was no plan really moving forward. And Carney has been flip-flopping on the pipelines. Yes, absolutely, pipelines will go through. He then, says to Quebec, no, we're not going to do pipelines. I don't know what he believes. And I guess it's a little bit disconcerting is the best way I could say it. Like, are we not checking what he's actually saying? I'm seeing it pop up in commentary and on certain, media, but then, in the polls, he's still riding high. So, right now, unless there's a real surge from the younger population who says, hey, we want to be able to buy houses, we want to be able to afford, to have kids, we want to have a future. I'm not sure. Right now, Carney is neck and neck with Pierre Poilievre.
What I also don't understand is I watched a lot of the political stuff, and I watched Donald Trump threaten us, and he's come out again and reiterated those threats of a 25% tariff on Canada, and even threatened to remove us from the Five Eyes security briefings. And he seems to have a real axe to grind with Canada. Whereas, then I watch him with Emmanuel President Macron, and best of friends, and they've never been better friends, and the French have been their best friends ever. And then I watch him with Japan, best of friends, and I watch him with all these countries where he's best of friends, and
Russia,
and Canada, who's been your neighbor, your good neighbor. He's got a real axe to grind with us, and it seems like that where he's these other what is. France has done a lot for the U.S. and the U.S. has done a lot for France, but Canada, come on, we've been there all the time.
I hope that a little part of me hopes that continues, because he really is losing the Americans on that. Yeah.
There's a lot of Americans fighting for us right now.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of Americans who love Canadians and think that we're kind and polite and that we are good neighbors and good trading partners. And I've started seeing some of the U.S. voices popping
Ben
up
Shapiro.
on social media, basically saying, wait. I get Mexico, China, I get these ones, but Canada? Really?
Yeah, so some people have said it's a direct attack on the Liberals that he's doing it, but he's using Canada as the punching bag, and it's so disconcerting. But here's the more confusing part. Tariff, Canada, threat. And today he came out, or was it yesterday, last night? Keystone Pipeline, need to get it going. If Keystone won't do it, somebody else will do it. And Danielle Smith just put out, yes, let's get the Keystone Pipeline going. So on one hand, bash Canada. On the other hand, just like, yes, the Keystone Pipeline, which was killed in day one of the Biden administration, which is another great pipeline for Canada.
Absolutely. I mean, I would put that one on the lower priority list for my priorities, just because I think that we need less, exactly, less dependence on the U.S. rather than more. But having said that, I'll take pipelines, wherever we can get them from. The tariffs are coming. What I'm really happy about is that I'm starting to see Canadian economists, whether it's big ones like Tiff Macklem or local ones here at UBCO.
Yeah, we did the story.
Like Dr. Hickey. Hickey. I think it is Hickey.
I don't know. It's on Clone now. You can watch it.
But I'm starting to see them say the worst thing that we could do in Canada is actually tariff back and retaliate. That's going to hurt Canadians. Yeah. And if Trump wants to put tariffs on and hurt Americans, go for it. But let's not retaliate that way. Let's retaliate by actually getting our trade partners going, moving goods and services throughout Canada, and making sure that we're firing on all cylinders. Doing something different. If you have a customer that says they don't want your goods anymore, fine. Then go somewhere else and sell them.
Tear down the interprovincial barriers that have been in place
100%.
for way too long, and then start developing outside markets. Like we could have, that Japanese deal should have been ours.
Absolutely. Tiff Macklem said 3 things. He said, let's get the interprovincial aspects gone. Let's reduce bureaucracy, and let's focus on productivity and moving Canada forward. Those should be our mantras right now. And last night at the Liberal debate, that was not what happened. That was not what they said. That was not how they actually talked. They were like, no, we're going to charge forward and we're going to beat up Trump. And it's like that's just not. I mean, maybe they think it's going to get them votes. Obviously, they do. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been focused that way. But I certainly don't see that as winning any favors. I want to see Canada thrive, and I want to see our kids thrive. And I want to. The only way to do that is not to retaliate against a big bad bully, but it's just to go and let's find a different playground with really cool kids.
Let's shift gears to BC a little bit. But I'll start off with Danielle Smith just gave the Albertans a tax break, and it's a big tax break too. And it's not a one-year tax break; it's a permanent tax break, she says, and it means a lot to most like middle-class families, and they're getting that tax break. David Eby promised British Columbians $1,000, took it off the table. So here's Alberta delivering on a tax break, and Eby saying he also says we're in wartime times, and that he can't give the tax break. If you look at that map of the GDP going on LinkedIn there to find it, it's forestry is still our number one contributor, and mining, and yet forestry is still in shambles in British Columbia.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, of course Danielle Smith is going to give a tax break because she can. They are in an absolute surplus situation with a GDP that's firing on all cylinders and outperforming the rest of Canada. Of course she's going to give a tax break. We are in the exact opposite. Our revenues are so far down. So even though forestry and mining are still performing, they're performing at fractions of what they used to perform at. And Eby is dead in the water. And I mean, I honestly think it's like a look over here, look over here, look over here. Their government in the first week of session has absolutely been exposed in some of the most brutal and heinous ways. That Ministry of Health report that was actually written in October before the election, that makes me so mad I can hardly see straight. When I was an MLA, we hammered, and I'm going to give credit where credit is due. MLA Eleanor Sturko absolutely exposed over and over and over again the amount of safe supply that was being diverted into illicit drugs. And she had proof, she had witnesses, 3 reporters, Kim Bolin, Adam Zivo, and Adam Sterling, stayed on, and I should say Fran Yenor from the Northern Beat. Those reporters stayed on it. They kept following the stories. And all we were told is it's not happening. It's not happening. In fact, in May of last year, MLA Mike Farnworth, or Minister Mike Farnworth, stood up and said it is not an issue. In fact, Bonnie Henry was actually supporting and trying to reinforce that we needed to prescribe more of this safe supply, only to find out that this report was already written in October that talked about millions of doses being diverted into illicit drug use. And the other thing is, we have to be really careful with how they are reporting the numbers. Right now, the deaths that they are reporting are from the poison drug supply, and I'm putting this in quotation marks because really it's the drugs that are out on the street. They are not reporting how many deaths from safe supply. So if they find you with a bunch of fentanyl that's been, or hydromorphone that's been prescribed, and you've passed, they're saying that that's not a death from poison drug use, and so that's not going to get reported in the same way. But nor will they actually report how many drug deaths are from prescribed supply rather than the non. So I'm so livid about what's happened, especially with our youth, and that was the part of the story that Eleanor has been bringing to bear over and over and over again, was that this is actually getting into our youth. This is how the drug dealers are accessing. They're telling our youth that this is safe, and they're being they're being killed by it. And there's been a couple of really high profile stories to that effect. And all the while, government under this NDP, this BC NDP EB government, they've been saying nope, it's not happening until this last week. They're like, oh wait, maybe it is. Okay, we're gonna now. Safe supply can only be distributed if it's supervised, not unsupervised. But it's absolutely disgusting.
Eleanor Sturco has been on fire, and she's been really shining a light on this issue. And if every MLA worked as hard as Eleanor Sturco, we would probably be in a better place today.
And this is not like a 1 week. Finally they're in session, and 1 week. She has been on this for the last 3 years, committing basically her political life to it. Exposing how the government is funding. Great article actually in the New Westminster Times. Great article on tracking all of the BC NDP funding that has gone to drug activists or actual safe supply, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in the past years. So I mean, take a look at these articles. It's all been fact checked. This is right out for you to see. But I mean, I did post on X this last week, like I am irate about this, and I cannot believe that the voters did not know this before the last vote. We as a BC United caucus were on it. We were in question period, really trying to hold government to account, and they were saying nothing to see here, nothing to see here, nothing to see here, until all of a sudden there was something to see, and they tried to divert it by putting Josie Osborne up there, the new Minister of Health, to pull off safe supply right before the session started. But I hope that the BC Conservatives stay on this, and that Eleanor remains steadfast in holding government to account, because there needs to be a full audit that's done on this.
Back to British Columbia's GDP. How much would that Northern Gateway pipeline have
I'm like, woo! Okay. Okay.
This thing is so
that's
important.
Like a little transition. Okay, here we go. Jim, okay, I'm with you.
It's just that Northern Gateway pipeline, LNG, we talked about Alberta and how much they're contributing, their GDP contributing to Canada. And BC is really low, and it used to be higher. And
we used to be number 1, now we're number 10.
And then they would have been a partner in Alberta getting that stuff to the outsized international markets. That Northern Gateway pipeline was a massive project, right, in Kitimat.
Yeah, massive. I mean, you look at all of the different natural resource projects that are slated, that are there, ready to go, that are stuck in environmental assessment, that have been shelved because of bureaucracy, and because money flows wherever it can go, and actually
capital's a coward. It'll go to the easiest spot possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, we are looking, and there is we do not have a lot of activity going on there right now. Is it a light switch that could go on? No. And I will say this: companies will also not believe a government that has prohibited them from moving forward now saying that they are they're
too
open
big of
for
an
business.
investment. Like, I mean,
No, they're gonna wait for a full shift on government and a new party to come in that will signal that they're open for business.
And you can look at that Teck, huge company for Canada, when they walked away from Frontier Oil in northern Alberta, after spending $1.5 billion, and they just said the current government situation is just not viable for them to continue investing money in that project.
Yeah, and I've said it before at the BC Business Summit last year. The head of Pembina or Pembina, I'm not sure which way you say that, Pembina. But Vice President of Pembina said, we came to BC because of the political environment, and we are leaving BC because of the political environment. I was like, you could have heard a pin drop in that room, especially with the government officials sitting on the VIP tables at the front. But it was a horrific condemnation of where we were at with the NDP, and former Premier Glenn Clark was actually delivered one of the speeches and talked about the NDP have to get out of the way. The NDP have to stop with all of the political nonsense and all the bureaucracy because we have to get businesses moving again. And I sat there and I went, and he started his whole speech by saying, I'm still a card-carrying NDPer, but I'm going to say some things that might not, make everyone happy here.
Let's talk about the last thing here, the carbon tax. When I interviewed David Eby, he said if the federal government drops the carbon tax, he will as well. It looks like no matter who wins this election, the consumer carbon tax is gone. So why doesn't he drop the carbon tax in BC? And how does he replace that revenue that they're getting from the carbon tax when BC's already suffering?
I don't think that they can unless they further taxation. What they're talking about is moving the carbon tax from consumers to industry. That's part of their agreement with the Greens as well. So I don't see that changing a whole lot. And it doesn't matter if you tax industry or if you tax the consumer. Either way, you're being taxed. Yeah. So either way, you're gonna experience that. If they just do a shift of the tax, it's still going to impact consumers today. I don't see it changing unless we get an actual economy that's roaring again. The only way that they're going to actually see more money, and that's what they're talking about right now in their updates on the budget, is that revenues are down. Why are revenues down? Because taxation is down. Why is taxation down? Because companies aren't making as much money. Yeah. And if you don't have corporate taxes, you don't have an economy, and you don't have money coming in to pay for all of the different services. Now, Brenda Bailey, new finance minister, has already said we're not going to cut any programs. Okay, if you don't cut any programs, you're going to go farther into debt. And your economy is going to still be, flailing, and they have not signaled anything yet. And I'm waiting for the budget to come out next week. But so far, they have not signaled that they are really serious for opening BC to new business. And the 6 projects that Eby mentioned about fast tracking are all ones that are currently sitting in environmental assessments, stuck in the NDP process. So this whole fast tracking is not like a new project is going to suddenly go through. It's like projects that have been sitting there for 10 to 12 years.
And if you look at the 2 biggest contributors for BC's GDP, it is forestry and mining. And if you have a company like Canfor, which was a BC-born company, actually, Canfor, a great Canadian company, has said when they closed Bear Lake and then suspended their investment in Houston and then cut shifts in Prince George, said that BC is no longer viable for them to invest in.
And we have to look at what has happened. Yes, we can talk about Canfor. We can also talk about Tolko, which is a privately family-owned business still, multi-generational BC company that started here and has been here. They just invested billions of dollars in the States. They're shutting down their own plants that are here in Canada and are opening up new plants in new mills in the U.S. We're not going to see these dollars come back just because Eby says lights are on. We're somehow going to be friendlier this time. Companies don't believe that. And I keep saying, as a voter, we have to believe what they have done, not what they are saying. And no greater case in point than what you mentioned earlier, which is David Eby and his $1,000 tax credit. No, everyone's going to get it. Everyone's going to get it. Everyone's going to get it. They get in, voted in with this slim, majority. It's like, oh, oopsies. No, we're not going to get it.
Yeah, and I would on the forestry thing. Forestry is one of the industries that will get hurt by tariffs and has been hurt by tariffs, even going way back to Jean Chrétien. The tariffs have been softwood lumber tariffs have been tough, but they say it's tough in there, but Alberta's forestry industry is booming. And then I interviewed one of the VPs for AP Planers, and he said like just across the border there, Alberta's forestry industry is growing great guns, and it's BC's regulations, access to fiber, and the stumpage costs and all that are really curtailing the forest industry. And people should care in British Columbia about forestry because BC is a huge forestry province.
Absolutely, and we don't fight our fires. If we fought our fires, I mean, just in 2023, I believe it was that year that 2 million. I think it might have been 2021 actually. But we burned 2.3 million hectares of fiber. That's 10 years of the allowable cut. Like if we think about that, right? In one fire season, we burned 10 years of what we allow to be cut every single year. Our forests have been so poorly managed by the BC government. It has been an absolute disaster fiasco. The bureaucracy has whittled away more and more and more and more and more. And I'm not even saying that we didn't need a reinvention of how we do forestry. I actually think we did need a reinvention, but they haven't done that full reinvention. What they've done is allowed activists to kind of pull apart different parts of it so that forestry companies are left flailing. And I think that we have to get past that, and we have to be moving forward on a much better footing.
There's a good documentary out there too on forestry in the Merritt area. They said they couldn't even get access to burnt timber. They couldn't get the permits. No. And I brought that up to Premier Eby when I interviewed him, and he said, yeah, we have a lot of work to do in our permitting. I mean, those are things that should get done fairly straightforward and easy, because if you don't cut that burnt stuff, like I think in a year or two, it just becomes unusable because it's just too dry.
Yeah, I also think that, I'd be remiss to say that one of the other issues that came forward last week in the BC legislature that affects forestry in great measure are the Indigenous rights and aspects that are being handed over without any sort of consultation with the BC public. There was an expose as well on some documents that were leaked on the Pender Harbor aspect of their dock situation, and how these rights were being given away without any sort of public consultation process. And we did see the Land Amendment Act come out last year and start to be socialized. And I think in some measure actually lost Nathan Cullen his seat up north, because he was the one that was really at the front and center of that whole aspect. The NDP ended up pulling it back and walking away from it in the Legislative Assembly, but it reared its head this last year, or this last month, and as the session went back in, and with some leaked documents as well on that. We have to be they've basically said Indigenous partners are the only way that you can get anything done in the forestry sector, and left all of these companies to really negotiate. Most of them are really happy to do so and are trying to move through that, but the goalposts keep changing, even for the Indigenous nations out there. So it's been a really, really wild and messy ride, whether it's the old growth aspects, or whether it's the Indigenous rights, or whether it's the landscape just keeps changing and changing and changing. And these companies just can't figure out what's going on. And so where are they going to go, and where's their capital going to go? Even homegrown BC companies like Canfor and Tolko, they're going to go south, where they're not dealing with those types of issues, and they're not dealing with that level of bureaucracy.
You and I have talked about it quite a bit, and that was one of the things that Eby brought up. He said that's the reason that they're not doing the $1,000 grocery rebate, is that capital is fleeing to the United States, but it's been doing that for a while.
Oh, it's been doing that for the last 7 years of the NDP.
it had like he's saying that it happened since Trump, but that's not true. Right,
No.
That's been happening for a while, and we and I talked about that giant sucking sound, and it's capital fleeing to the United States because lower taxes, less regulations, and easier to get projects moved forward.
And a bigger population, a bigger market. The market is 10 times what the market is in Canada, with a smaller footprint. So you can actually have access to huge amounts of markets. I mean, opening up a store in California, in Southern California, you have as many people as all of Canada. Like the economy that is down there is absolutely huge in comparison. So why are companies going to go down there? Because there's a bigger market.
You know who we should ask why they're going down there? Mark Carney himself, because they moved Brookfield Asset Management to New York.
New York,
so there you
right
go.
after the election.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Mark Carney himself believes that the United States is a better place to do business, and that's a good question that doesn't come up in the leadership debate.
I was just about to say, why was that not brought up? Absolutely, somebody should be asking that question.
And then Brookfield Asset Management, another good question to ask if you're able to ask these questions tonight in leadership debate is Brookfield Asset Management is in the United States right now raising money to invest in green technologies, and that's what they're going to be pushing here in Canada. So it's odd that the company that he chaired is all of a sudden moved to the United States, raising money in the United States, and also going to be investing in green technologies. And that same company has been called out several times for cheating on their carbon credits.
Yes.
You can go find all those stories online. I'm not making it up.
No, you're not making it up. And that is why, I mean, it's one of the reasons that that there's a call for Carney to actually disclose what you're involved in, disclose, what you have spent, disclose who's giving you money, disclose, your conflicts of interest. The Canadian people should know who they're electing as the Liberal leader.
I just watched on Bloomberg this morning another Canadian company that was going to move to the United States, then got some shareholder backlash, and then has decided not to move their operations to the United States. The question is, with the Liberals pushing this buy Canadian, will Mark Carney move Brookfield back to Canada? That's a good question, right? And why is he raising money there, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's been our half hour. We're a little bit over. Another great show.
If you do say so yourself.
There you go. Again, we're very fortunate to have Renee Merrifield, a former MLA for British Columbia, sharing her knowledge. A recovering politician. There you go. Anyway, our job is to hold power accountable, and the people in power right now are the Liberals and the NDP. So it's not like we're just picking on them. They happen to be in power. So that's what we're supposed to do. So we thank you for watching, and we'll be back next Tuesday with Beyond the Ballot. And then we're going to have our regular news show here probably in about 15 minutes. Thank you for watching Kelowna Now.